For decades, people wondered if Judi Dench and Maggie Smith were friends, rivals, or something far more complicated. They shared dressing rooms, stole scenes, traded insults like love letters, and grew old inside the same impossible profession. But after Maggie's death, Judi's tears revealed the truth. The rumor was never that they hated each other. The truth was that they understood each other too well. Judi Dench and Maggie Smith never needed to explain their friendship in soft, sentimental language. That was not their style. They were too sharp for that. Too quick, too British, too trained by the stage to turn emotion into something clean and pretty. If you watch them together, they rarely behaved like two actresses trying to prove how much they adored each other. They teased, they interrupted, they corrected. They made each other laugh in a way only old friends can, because old friends know exactly where the bruise is and exactly how hard they can press before it hurts. That is why rumors followed them for years. Some people looked at their teasing and saw rivalry. Others saw jealousy. Others imagined two great actresses silently competing for roles, awards, applause, and space inside the same golden generation of British theater. It made sense from the outside. They were born weeks apart. They rose through the stage around the same time. They became dames, Oscar winners, national treasures, and two of the most recognizable actresses in the world. But the truth was stranger and warmer. Their rivalry was real, but it was not the enemy of their friendship. It was part of it. Judi and Maggie met as young actresses in the world of theater, long before Harry Potter, Downton Abbey, James Bond, or the later image of two grand dames sitting in armchairs being adored by everyone. They were not icons then. They were working actresses, sharing rooms, learning the rhythm of professional survival, and try to prove themselves in an industry that did not give women endless chances to age, fail, or take up space. The old Vic became part of their origin story. Maggie later joked that she and Judi went back a long way, remembering how they shared a dressing room, and how Judi played the ingenue while Maggie did not. That joke carried more than humor. It carried the quiet sting of acting life, where age, type, beauty, casting, and timing decide how the world sees you before you even speak. From the beginning, they were compared. That is what happens when two women of extraordinary talent rise near each other. The public loves to turn admiration into a contest. Who was better? Who was funnier? Who had more range? Who had the sharper tongue? Who aged more gracefully? Who stole the scene? Who was asked first? Even the women themselves joked about it. They understood the game because they had lived inside it for decades. But they also understood something outsiders often missed. Comparison can wound, but it can also sharpen. When the person beside you is brilliant, you either shrink or become better. Judi and Maggie became better. That is the first truth Judi's grief exposed. These women were not simply sweet old friends. They were lifelong witnesses to each other's ambition, insecurity, brilliance, disappointment, survival, and age. That kind of friendship does not need constant softness. It is built from recognition. Judi did not cry for a distant colleague. She cried for someone who had been part of her professional mirror for nearly a lifetime. The public loved Maggie Smith because she could weaponize a sentence. By the time younger audiences discovered her as Professor McGonagall in Harry Potter or Violet Crawley in Downton Abbey, Maggie had already mastered the art of making one raised eyebrow feel like a courtroom verdict. She could cut a character in half without raising her voice. She could make a line funny, cruel, sad, and elegant all at once. That became her late career signature. But it also trapped her. To millions of fans, Maggie became the sharp old woman with perfect timing. The professor, the dowager, the aristocratic destroyer of fools. The woman who could enter a scene, say one line, and make everyone else look slow. But Judi knew the fuller version. She knew the stage actress before the global franchise fame. She knew the younger Maggie who fought for serious roles, who held her own beside Laurence Olivier, who earned attention not because she was comfortable, but because she was dangerously alive on stage. She knew the actress who could be funny, yes, but also wounded, difficult, romantic, lonely, fierce, exhausted, and exacting. Maggie's career was never one note. She won her first Academy Award for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, playing a teacher whose confidence turns almost frightening. She won another Oscar for California Suite, where she played an actress caught in the absurdity of awards, insecurity, and ego. She moved between Shakespeare, West End comedy, Broadway, Merchant Ivory Films, Agatha Christie mysteries, fantasy, period drama, and television. That range matters because it explains why she did not like being reduced to an image. Maggie could be hilarious, but she was not a joke. She could be severe, but she was not cold. She could be intimidating, but she was not empty of tenderness. In fact, part of her greatness came from how well she hid vulnerability until the exact moment it mattered. The rumors about her personality often grew from that surface. People called her prickly, difficult, private, sharp, unsentimental. Those words followed many older actresses, especially women who did not soften themselves to be more lovable. But in Maggie's case, the steel was only part of the story. There was also pain. Her first marriage to actor Robert Stevens became difficult and unstable. His struggles with alcohol, mental health, and infidelity put strain on their life together. Maggie tried to hold things together while raising their sons and continuing to work. Eventually, the marriage ended. Later, she married playwright Beverly Cross, who became a steady presence in her life until his death. After losing him, Maggie never remarried. That loss shaped her. Publicly, she remained controlled. Privately, she understood emptiness, endurance, and the strange loneliness that can follow even the most celebrated career. That is why Judi's grief matters. Judi also knew what it meant to lose the person beside you. Her husband, Michael Williams, died in 2001, and she spoke over the years about grief as something that could become fuel. So what were the rumors Judi finally admitted? Not some scandal, not hatred, not jealousy in the cheap sense. The real rumor was that the two women were rivals. And the truth is, they were, but not in the way people wanted. Judi and Maggie were rivals because they belonged to the same rare category. There are only so many actresses in any generation who can dominate Shakespeare, comedy, film, television, and national affection all at once. There are only so many roles written for older women with real bite. There are only so many lifetime achievement conversations where the same names keep returning. They knew that. Maggie could joke that Judi was always asked first. Judi could laugh because the joke was funny, but also because there was truth inside it. That is the kind of line only a friend can deliver. From a stranger, it would sound bitter. From Maggie, it sounded like affection sharpened into a blade. Their friendship survived because both women understood the rules. Acting is not as gentle as audiences imagine. Behind every role is someone who did not get it. Behind every award is someone else clapping with a fixed smile. Behind every glowing review is another performer wondering whether their best work has already passed. For women, that pressure becomes even more brutal with age. Judi and Maggie watched each other survive it. That is what made their connection special. They were not pretending ambition did not exist. They were not pretending competition did not sting. They simply refused to let the industry turn that competition into hatred. That is the new storyline. Their friendship was not powerful because it had no rivalry. It was powerful because it survived rivalry. In a different Hollywood story, two actresses like this would be written as enemies. One would be jealous of the other. One would resent the bigger role. One would try to replace the other. The public loved that version because it is easy. Women competing is treated as drama. Women admiring each other while still wanting excellence from themselves is more complicated. Judi and Maggie lived in the complicated version. They could sit together in Nothing Like a Dame with Joan Plowright and Eileen Atkins and speak with the ease of women who had nothing left to prove, but still remembered everything. They could laugh about age, work, memory, casting, eyesight, and death because the alternative of pretending time had not touched them. That is what people responded to, not glamour, recognition. By the time they were old, they had become symbols of endurance. They were proof that women's careers did not have to end when youth ended. They were proof that wit could deepen with age. They were proof that an actress could keep changing, keep working, keep commanding attention, even when the industry tried to narrow the roles available to her. And maybe that is the truth Judi finally admitted without needing to say it directly. Maggie was not just a friend. She was part of the proof that Judi's own life had been real. At the Cheltenham Literature Festival, Judi Dench was reportedly in good spirits at first. That feels important, because grief often arrives that way. Not always in the quiet room. Not always when you expect it. Sometimes you're joking, telling stories, performing the version of yourself everyone wants to see. Then someone says a name, and suddenly the floor shifts. When Judi was asked about Maggie Smith and Barbara Lee Hunt, another close friend who had died, the question moved into grief. Judi had once compared grief to petrol, as if sorrow could become a kind of energy. She began to explain, then could not finish. That silence said more than any polished tribute could. Judi Dench is one of the most controlled performers alive. She has played queens, spies, mothers, comic eccentrics, Shakespearean heroines, and women holding entire rooms with stillness. She knows how to use voice, breath, pause, and expression. If anyone could turn grief into an elegant answer, it was her. But in that moment, there was no performance large enough to contain the loss. That is why it moved people. The public had already mourned Maggie Smith as an icon. Fans remembered McGonagall. Downton Abbey viewers remembered Violet Crawley. Theater lovers remembered decades of stage work. Film lovers remembered the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, A Room with a View, Gosford Park, Sister Act, Hook, Ladies in Lavender, and so many other performances. But Judi mourned something else. She mourned the woman who existed between the roles. The dressing room woman, the joking woman, the competitive woman, the friend who could puncture your ego and make you laugh in the same breath. The woman who knew what it meant to spend a lifetime being watched and still remain private. That kind of loss is different. When a friend from youth dies, they take a version of you with them. Maggie remembered a Judi the public never saw. Judi remembered a Maggie the public only guessed at. Between them lived decades of private shorthand, shared names, backstage memories, old wounds, jokes that needed no setup, and griefs no audience could fully understand. That is why Judi's tears felt like an admission. She did not need to say, "I loved her." The breakdown said it. She did not need to say, "The rivalry was never hatred." The grief said it. She did not need to defend Maggie from every rumor about being difficult, sharp, cold, or impossible. Her silence did that too, because you do not break like that for someone who was only a rival. You break like that for someone who was woven into your life. Maggie Smith and Judi Dench became beloved late in life for roles that introduced them to younger audiences. But that late fame can be misleading. For many fans, Maggie began with Harry Potter or Downton Abbey. Judi began with James Bond. But by the time those projects made them globally familiar to new generations, both women had already lived entire artistic lives. That is part of what makes their story important. They were not overnight icons. They were workers. They came from theater, where acting is not protected by editing. On stage, there is no close-up to rescue you, no second take, no soundtrack to tell the audience how to feel. You stand there and survive the moment. If something goes wrong, you keep going. If another actor hits harder than expected, you absorb it. If the audience is cold, you warm the room yourself. Maggie learned that world early. Judi learned it too. That shared discipline shaped everything. It explains Maggie's precision. It explains Judi's emotional force. It explains why both of them could steal scenes in films without seeming desperate. They did not need to reach for attention. They understood timing. They knew when to enter a line, when to wait, when to let silence work. They also knew what it meant to age in public. This is another reason their friendship mattered. Most actresses of their generation watched opportunities shrink with age. Youth was celebrated. Beauty was measured harshly. Women were expected to accept fewer roles, smaller roles, softer roles. But Maggie and Judi turned age into authority. Maggie's later career did not hide her age. It sharpened it. Violet Crawley's one-liners worked because Maggie carried decades of class, timing, and impatience behind them. Professor McGonagall worked because she seemed like someone who had seen generations of nonsense and survived all of it. Judi's later career did the same. As M in the James Bond films, she changed the energy of the franchise. She was not decorative. She was command. Her age made her more formidable, not less. Her voice could carry disappointment, authority, affection, and danger in the same sentence. Together, they helped rewrite what older actresses could mean on screen. That may be their quiet revolution. They did not beg the industry to make them young again. They made age watchable, funny, terrifying, elegant, and emotionally dangerous. They reminded audiences that older women are not side notes to other people's stories. They carry memory. They carry judgment. They carry grief. They carry power. And now, with Maggie gone and Judi living with serious eyesight problems, the story has entered a more fragile chapter. Judi has spoken openly about macular degeneration affecting her ability to work. That adds another layer to the title, At 91. This is not only a woman remembering a dead friend. This is an actress facing the narrowing of the very tools that built her life. Sight memory, stage movement, reading scripts, recognizing faces. Loss is no longer abstract. It is everywhere. And yet, Judi still carries the same stubborn theatrical spirit. If she can work, she wants to work. If she is asked, she wants to continue. That is where her bond with Maggie feels most alive. Both women understood the same truth. Acting was not something they did before retirement. It was how they remained themselves. The title says Judi finally admits the rumors about Maggie Smith. So here is what she really revealed. Maggie Smith was sharper than people imagined, but softer than people knew. She was competitive, but not cruel. She was private, but not empty. She was funny, but not light. She could seem untouchable, but the people who loved her knew how much she had survived. That is the part audiences rarely get from a public legacy. When someone dies, the world turns them into roles. Maggie becomes McGonagall, the Dowager Countess, Miss Jean Brodie, Mother Superior, the grande dame of British acting. All of that is true, but it is not complete. Judi's grief completed part of the picture. It reminded people that Maggie was not only a performer to be admired, she was a friend to be missed. She occupied space in private lives, not just film history. Her absence changed rooms that audiences will never enter. That is why the rumor of rivalry now feels almost too small. Of course they competed. They were brilliant women in the same profession for more than half a century. Of course there were jokes, comparisons, roles, timings, and moments where one was asked before the other. But the deeper truth is that their friendship made room for all of it. That is rare. Many friendships survive because people avoid the uncomfortable truths. Judi and Maggie seemed to survive because they could joke about them. They could turn insecurity into wit. They could make aging ridiculous before anyone else weaponized it against them. They could look at death, work, memory, and grief without pretending to be untouched. That is what Judi's tears finally admitted. Maggie mattered not because she was perfect, but because she was irreplaceable. And irreplaceable people do not always arrive gently. Sometimes they arrive with a cutting remark. Sometimes they correct you. Sometimes they get the better line. Sometimes they are asked first. Sometimes they drive you mad because they know you too well. Then one day they are gone, and all the irritation becomes treasure. That is the cruel magic of grief. It edits the past without erasing the truth. The rivalry becomes affection. The teasing becomes proof of closeness. The old jokes become evidence that someone once stood close enough to wound you safely. At 91, Judi Dench does not need to protect a polished myth. She has outlived too much for that. What she revealed, through tears more than words, is that Maggie Smith was not simply her peer. She was one of the few people who understood the full cost of the life they both chose. The applause, the pressure, the roles, the losses, the loneliness, the ridiculousness, the survival. That is why the friendship still matters. Because in the end, Judi and Maggie were not two legends sitting politely beside each other in British acting history. They were two women who walked the same long road, sometimes side by side, sometimes in competition, sometimes laughing at the absurdity of still being asked questions they had answered for decades. And when one of them reached the end, the other did not offer a perfect speech. She cried. That may be the most honest tribute of all. Judi Dench did not expose a feud.